What is the creepiest thing that has ever happened to you? When I was in my early 20s, I was fresh out of closet and lived in the French Quarter. I started getting hang-up calls from someone, presumably a hookup. After a few months of sporadic calls, someone showed up outside of my window at around 2 a.m. and started blasting a tape recording of me saying, "Hello? Hello?" then drove off. Didn't happen to me, but a few stories from where I work. I work in a medium-sized city hotel. For some reason, we seem to attract the weirdos. First story happened to the late duty manager as she was doing her nightly walk around before handing over to the night porter. As she's walking around, checking all the doors that should be closed and locked, she finds the door to one of the function rooms is unlocked. She walks into the room. The lights are off, and as it's dark out, she flicks on the light to check the area. Stood in the middle of the room, in the pitch dark, is an old woman, slightly disheveled and crazy hair, think bag lady, just staring at her. Now, this woman has obviously come into the hotel much earlier in the day, or she would have been noticed as she walked past reception and down the hall to the function room. Turned out she'd been stood in there in the dark for a good few hours. DM tells her to leave, she just stares daggers at her and walks out without saying a word. The second story happened to the night porter at the same hotel. Following a report that something had gone missing from the staff room one night, we reviewed the CCTV tapes the next day. It turned out that some bloke had managed to get in through an unsecured delivery entrance downstairs and nicked some belongings from the staff room one night. The creepy thing is, having done this, instead of leaving the way he came, he went upstairs, through the kitchen, and into the bar. Now, the bar is separated from reception, where the MP spends most of his shift, by a curtain. The intruder then proceeds to spend a good 4 hours just peering through a gap in the curtain at the porter. When the night porter comes into the bar area to set up for breakfast, this bloke just ducks behind the bar and continues to stare at him. Eventually, as the sun comes up and the MP goes to the toilet or whatever, the guy just walks out the front door. Even just watching the tapes creeped me out. You could see the NP felt uncomfortable just by the way he looked around all night. After we showed him the tapes, he said he had felt uneasy that night, but didn't know why. We never caught the creepy thief. The creepy lady, however, does make an appearance every now and again, generally trying some odd stuff, but most of the time we catch her before she manages to scare anyone else half to death. Walking home from 7-Eleven in San Diego. A guy parks across the street and starts walking behind me, asking me incoherent questions. I apologize. I'm new here. Keep walking. Guy slaps beer out of my hands, puts one arm under my right armpit, uses the right boob as a kind of a handle and the other between my legs, and gropes the lady zone and starts dragging me into bushes. I'm awkward and shocked, so I start forcefully scolding him. "Sir, no, sir, no!" Not loudly enough until I realize he's successfully kidnapping me and likely for nefarious purposes. I yell louder, "No!" Thankfully, an off-duty cop was jogging and came running at the guy, who dropped me, grabbed my purse, ran, then dropped it and kept running. They found him a few months later. I testified and he went to federal prison. I think he's out as of last year. A few years back, I woke up in the middle of the night. We had a 2-month newborn sleeping in the room next door. I had a video monitor on my bedside table so that my wife and I could easily check on him. So I clicked the button that turns on the video image, and what I saw scared me like nothing ever before. My baby boy was gone. Now, I know that instincts should have made me run into the baby's room. Instead, I froze. I looked over and my wife was sleeping next to me. Finally, I moved, but not to run into the other room like I should have done. Instead, I turned up the volume on the baby monitor. I heard another woman's voice singing a lullaby. I'm not kidding. Another woman was singing to my baby in a very soft, gentle, and melodic voice. I don't remember what song it was. Something like, "Go to sleep, little baby." Finally, my freeze broke. I jumped up, ran through the hallway, and burst into my boy's room. He was sound asleep in his crib. No woman, no singing. Turns out, the monitor was picking my next-door neighbor's monitor. They had just bought the video monitor for their own newborn. Nothing supernatural here, but I don't know if I've ever experienced something scarier. When I was 11, my mother and I lived with her boyfriend, who I hated. He was occasionally physically abusive to me and was always intimidating. Anyway, when it got super creepy was one rainy Saturday morning. My mom was at work, so it was just me and quote-unquote Rick home. The phone rang at about 8 a.m. and I jumped out of bed and went to the kitchen to answer it. It was my little league coach calling to confirm that my baseball game had been rained out. I headed back toward my bedroom but had to pass Rick's bedroom to get there. As I did, here he stood, 6'2" and buck naked. Not wanting to chat with any grown naked man, I averted my gaze and tried to shoot into my bedroom. As I tried to shut the door, I felt something block it open. Rick had followed me to my room and stuck his foot out to keep me from shutting the door. He stood right by me, towering over me, and asked what the call was. I told him, but he just stood there, 2 feet away, naked and glaring at me for what was probably 30 seconds, but felt more like 5 minutes. He said nothing but stared angrily at me. I was already terrified of him from some violence he had committed against me before, but this was different. This felt like a strange sexual intimidation. Very scary for a young boy, very creepy. He finally turned around and walked away. Nothing like that ever happened again, but I did later learn he had some strange sexual issues. I was left with the feeling that he was sizing me up in a very creepy and unhealthy way. It has stuck with me almost 35 years now. Someone attempted to kidnap my friend in front of me. I was about 8 and walking home from the school bus stop in a scattered group with various neighborhood kids and parents. I was walking with my mom, and my friend had fallen a few feet behind us. This beat-to-crap brown car pulled up and stopped by my friend. I turned around just in time to see her shake her head no and run toward my mom and me. The driver was a former employee her parents had just fired. He saw her walking, pulled up, and yelled, "Get in!" He did all of this with multiple witnesses. I don't know what his long-term plan was, but at least he wanted to frighten her parents for firing him. When I was in 3rd grade, I remember getting called to the front office to be dismissed. I always knew when I would be getting dismissed beforehand, so this caught me off guard. Maybe my mom was going to surprise me with a day off? Maybe? Anyway, I get about halfway to the office and my teacher comes up behind me screaming at the top of her lungs to get back into the classroom now, and grabbed my arm super hard, which I understand now as an adult, and dragged me back into the classroom. I thought I was in trouble. She immediately slammed the door shut behind me and locked it, then flipped the lights off. I'm so very confused. The classroom phone was lying on her desk instead of being hung up on the wall. She whispers into the phone that I'm officially back in the room and in lockdown. Then an announcement over the school's intercom informs the entire school that they need to be in lockdown and that all students need to run back to the classrooms. Cue silent panic. Long story short, some random guy tried to dismiss me from school to kidnap me. We don't know who he was or anything about him. My mother was immediately called to dismiss me after being phoned about the incident. She had to show her license and walk all the way to the classroom to physically walk with me. 3 days after this event, happened on a Friday, we had full photo name tags for any non-student, aka an adult, who wanted to walk through the office doors. You had to give your license number, scan a copy of your license, take a current pic to be printed on a temp badge, then be cleared to enter the actual building by scanning the photo ID temp badge. Makes me sick to think about. I now have a 3-year-old daughter who I am slightly nervous about sending to school in a few years. Fortunately, school security is way more amped up than when I was in school back in the 90s. When my kid was about 2.5 years old, he was a champion sleeper. Put him to bed, he was out pretty quick and would sleep through the night until morning. One weeknight, he wakes up around 11 p.m. crying about his grandmother, his dad's mom, saying he wants to call her. I tell him we can't call her because she's sleeping, just like he should be. It took a while and I had to let him stay in my bed, but got him back to sleep by promising we would call her at 7 a.m. when we wake up for school. My alarm goes off at 7 a.m. He immediately gets up and asks to call Grandma. We do, and answers the phone. Apparently, Grandma was in a work-related accident at about 11 p.m. the night before, and had only just gotten home from the hospital about an hour before, so she was sleeping. Easily the creepiest moment of my life. My kid and his grandma have some seriously deep connection I'm unable to explain. I used to have a job at a casino that got me working some pretty weird hours. Some days I would work a normal 9 to 5. Others I would go in at 6 p.m. and not leave until 2 or 3 a.m. Not a big deal, except by that time in the morning all the parking spaces around my apartment building would be taken. So I had to park a few blocks away and walk to get to my building. I would park, get my pepper spray and keys in hand, lock my car, and walk the block or two to my building. I never felt like I was in any way unsafe until one night when I found a parking space across the street from my building that happened to be in front of a bar. I pulled into the space and got my keys ready. I noticed a guy smoking in the doorway of the bar, around 5 cars down, but he was looking in the other direction and didn't seem to care that I was there. I got out of the car and was about halfway across the street before he noticed I was a girl, and I heard him yell, "Hi, sweetie." I ignored him, and that must have pissed him off, because he yelled, "Bitch!" I started sprinting to my building when I heard the sound of him running up behind me. The building I lived in at the time had been built a long time ago, and everything was outdated, including the security system. After 10 p.m., the doors would lock automatically, and you would have to put in a key in the lock and turn it for the doors to open, and it would take forever. I finally got the door opened and had just shut it before he got there and was yanking on the handle and screaming at me. My skin was crawling for a few days after that. I was seeing a girl occasionally, friends with benefits setup. About 2 months into our fling, I have a ridiculously vivid dream of the girl having a C-section and giving birth to my son. I can remember holding my son, the feel of his warm, smooth, fragile skin in this dream. I remember dreaming about looking into his milky blue eyes, smelling his milky breath as I bent down to kiss him. The dream was powerful, realistic. I told her about it. She laughed. She has an IUD in, she tells me, and cannot get pregnant. Phew, just a silly, albeit realistic dream. We have a good laugh at my expense. Fast forward 3 months, she's gained some weight and is having strange bouts of nausea. So, goes to the doctor. She was pregnant, with an IUD, and the use of condoms 99.8% of the time, at the time of my dream. The doctor says at one point, "Too bad you didn't play the lottery that day, 99% isn't 100%. They removed the IUD. 4 months later, she has a baby boy. In the delivery room, she jokes, "At least we don't need a C-section." 16 hours of labor later, emergency C-section. He turns 1 on April 5th, just a few days from now. Pretty awesome, but still creepy. Thanks for supporting Ask Planet.